Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sunday at the Circus, where I make it up as I go along. I hear my voice back to me, so I'm going to have to mute that down. Well, hey, everyone. I'm going to try and monitor the chats today. I'll try to keep this interactive um, as much as I can. I think the fun part about doing it live is you can interact with the audience. So if you're watching live on X or um, Substack. Um, Welcome to throw some words in the chat, and if you have a question as we go, I'm happy to try and respond. How was everyone's week? It was a pretty crazy week, right? It was crazy. Well, we got a bunch of people here, a lot of people joining um, across the various platforms. We are streaming live on YouTube as well. I have kind of an inchoate YouTube channel that I'm not really um, working too hard on right now. I'm really focused on the writing. Um, just has been taking a lot out of me, quite frankly. It's been a really busy week of trying to keep up with everything. Um, if you haven't, I you should check out my interview that I did with Reed Galen on the home front, Lincoln Project co-founder. Where we talked about some things. It was a spicy conversation. Had a lot of fun talking to Reed. Um, so, uh, like where do we find ourselves, right, in this moment? I for free subscribers, we released to all free subscribers this piece that I wrote earlier in the week. What time is it, right? Which is my attempt based on my best understanding of the geopolitical situation and the world and the sort of the historical perspective or historical situatedness, and thinking about sort of the large forces, the large political forces in the world that are reshaping the contours of power. Like what time is it, right? Because there is the question, right? Like how far are we along towards this authoritarian consolidation? Is all hope lost? Has democracy failed? Um, and I wanted to frame for people like how I feel, what I despair a little bit about, and what I also have hope about. Um, a friend of mine, and if you follow me, you see me mention him. I also did a Substack live with him recently. A philosopher from the United Kingdom, Vlad Vexler, who's a expert on Russia, um, as well as being a scholar of Isaiah Berlin, also a major philosophical influence for me. And he wrote, he wrote a pretty interesting analysis of the position that Vladimir Putin finds himself in. And um, I mean, it's not like the first time that this idea of dictators and personality based power has been sort of understood by political scientists and historians to have this hollowing out effect, this evacuation of competence from within the structure of power. And and I think the Putin's actions in this moment, I think, sort of reveal the challenge, right, that the authoritarians face. I mean, this is kind of this is like a way to maybe take yourself out of your, because we're all sitting here, right, like wondering if the government's going to break down our door at any moment, right, and take us away. And so you have this sense of helplessness, right, that there's this giant uh machine of power that's bearing down on all of us. But that's, I mean, and there's like truth in that perspective. But there's also truth in the perspective that from the viewpoint of the authoritarians, they see, all of us. They see the protests. They see the No Kings protests. They see that Jimmy Kimmel is back on the air. They see people fighting. They see Gavin Newsom. They see JB Pritzker. They see Mamdani and New York. They're seeing this upswell. They're seeing this anger rise up against them. They're seeing defections within their own ranks. In the case of Georgia Congresswoman, why is she's brains drawing a blank? Uh, Anyways, it'll come back to me. But we're seeing fractures, right? You're seeing, Rand Paul made an allusion to there being, Marjorie Taylor Greene just came back to me. You have you have Rand Paul saying there's up to 20 Republican senators who are getting really, really like nervous about Trump. He made that statement in the last 24 hours. So look, there's resistance is building. That part's true, right? And that can give us some hope. There's momentum on our side, right? I think that there was this moment, right, with the very tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, and it was tragic, right? We don't ever want political violence in a democracy because it removes the possibility of democracy when political opponents kill each other. And so, we condemn this. We condemn political violence in all cases. But I think there was maybe a sense, a moment where people kind of felt like, this was the Reichstag fire moment. This was the moment that authoritarian consolidation was going to complete itself. And I think maybe about a month removed from those tragic events in Utah, we can take a little perspective here and look at like what's happening in the world, both in the United States and around the world. And there's a lot of power centers in the world that are, testing boundaries on both sides. On the pro-democracy side, we see this happening in Hungary with the anti-Orban opposition, anti-Putin, anti-Orban opposition was on the streets of in Hungary, in Budapest, showing the strength of the democratic opposition there. So there is hope, right? So when I wrote this piece, what time is it? I asked the question, right? Is it 1923? Is it 1927? Is it 1930? Is it 1933? Or is it 1937? I think it's 1930, right? It's too late for complacence and it's too early to lose hope. And I know that it's like always like a dangerous thing, right, in these discussions to compare this to the collapse of the Weimar Republic. And there's certainly a lot of worrying parallels, right, of there, but there's also really important differences between now and then, right? One is the fact that we have independent media now, like this, like me, like you, like look at us. We're all talking to each other through independent channels, like here on Substack. People with their YouTube channels. Obviously, these platforms are owned and controlled by interests that are currently calculating, their own survival in various ways. And that's scary and that's dangerous. But we also have, Blue Sky and there's other, Mastodon and other like, there's resistance technology that people are also building. in this moment. People, there's like this mesh core technology that people are looking at, right, as an alternative to text messaging that doesn't use the internet, uses short range radio technology. You can, like, all these things that are starting kind of starting to happen, right, to the on the among people who recognize what time it is, right? That they recognize it's 1930 and it's time to start, putting the infrastructure in place for resistance, and that's happening. That's happening, and it's happening in ways it wasn't happening in 1930. Because the difference between 1930 and 2025 is that we actually have 1930 as a example. And we have people like Timothy Snyder and Heather Cox Richardson and really, really smart historians and people who are experts in authoritarianism that are in our public conversation, that are helping us learn about that history and give us that historical perspective. In 1930, the German people didn't have that advantage. We have that advantage. So that's a major difference, right? In terms of thinking about how this will play out, right? So we have a historically grounded understanding in, like, what this could all represent, what it could all mean, what could happen if we do nothing. But we also, with all that information, right, we also have the possibility, right? The possibility of resistance, the possibility of democratic renewal. So you have to hold these two thoughts in your head together. It's very important. Um, and and recognize, right, that fundamentally that um and people will say this is sappy, and a lot of people will, like, roll their eyes. I genuinely believe this, right, that that civilization is or the liberal project, at least in my case. And so I'm going to be defend my position here, like, philosophically and morally, that liberalism, like small L liberalism, which is the idea, right? This radical idea, right, of that, you know all of us, like, have equal right, to pursue our own ends with dignity, peacefully, and that we should build institutions that mediate power in a way that none of us can wield it against each other unaccountably. And this liberal democratic project, which I believe is the most important political invention of human history, is being challenged. But it's a project of love. It's a project of love. Um, I believe in liberal democracy because I love humanity. Um, I believe in this republic, this liberal democratic republic, because I love this country. Um, and and while it's certainly true that our institutions are damaged, that they have problems, they haven't, like, necessarily lived up to their potential, that Madison's vision of ambition, checking ambition, has been negated by by the factionalism that Washington warned against in his farewell speech. This is all true. The possibility of renewal remains. And if we step back, if we stop reacting to the reactionary bullshit that pervades our media landscape, that keeps forcing us to answer the question, like, do you believe there's more than two genders? Like this sort of attempt to kind of, like, keep us on our back foot, rather than asking the more important question right now, which is, like, like, where are the Epstein files? Why is how is Donald Trump conducting business deals as in the Oval Office, on a in Singapore and in Scotland, like opening a new golf course and in Scotland, flying there on Air Force One. Like, what are we talking about here? How many genders there are, or the fact that a highly corrupt criminal who tried to overthrow an election in 2020 tried to overthrow an election, and people will argue that that he had nothing to do with January 6th. Everyone knows that he did. Anyone with a thing with a mind like understands that he did. Um, and understand that like whether or not you think there's more than two genders is a I mean, that seems to me to be a free speech issue. It seems to me to be a First Amendment protected opinion. So so you're certainly entitled to the position that there's only two genders. Certainly, that's a First Amendment protected position. And you're certainly allowed to disagree with that. That is like completely protected constitutional speech. And and so anybody who keeps trying to bring it back to that when we're having a conversation about like the rule of law and the in the state of our country and the actions that Donald Trump is taking, which are in fact completely related to all of our collective franchise, our collective inheritance, our collective ownership, that we the people govern ourselves. This government is ours, not his. He clearly thinks it's his. And everyone can see this who's paying attention. If your response is like, well, what about the fact that the left thinks there's more than two genders? You are not a serious person. This is not a serious discussion. Do not get pulled into this discussion. It is not the thing that's important. Like, look, I mean, even if Rhea, Chaya Raychek at like Libs of TikTok, if I were to agree with her about everything in her culture critique, which I don't worry. Like, I don't understand what that has to do with whether or not the president of the United States has the power to wage unconstitutional war in Venezuela, to blow up, boats in international waters in contravention of both international and U.S. law without congressional authorization, which the founders, which these people claim to revere, very clearly made it Congress's responsibility to give that authorization. Like, I like what are like if you want to bring this back to a conversation about gender ideology, you are not a serious person. You're not a serious person. You're welcome to you're welcome to debate it till the cows come home, but we should at least agree on these things. That nobody is above the law, not the president of the United States, that Congress has the power of the purse under its Article 1 powers, only Congress has the authorization to wage war, that a president profiting off the presidency, embezzling, accepting gifts from foreign governments, which violates the emoluments clause, is unconstitutional. So whatever you think about the craziness of the left culturally, and we can talk about that, I don't understand what the fuck that has to do with any of this. Because if you do think it has something to do with this, then it says to me that you think that's more important than the Constitution. And if you think that's more important than the Constitution, then you support sedition. That's sedition against the United States of America. Maybe not legally. I mean, obviously, the legal distinction, but I at least say that, as a moral charge. That if you think that allowing this man to usurp the rule of law, usurp Congress, usurp the courts, And you think that's justified because the cause is crushing this leftist culture that you hate so much. I mean, well, you've really revealed like who you are, right? You're no different than the Confederate states that launched the Civil War in the mid 19th century in this country. You're no different. I mean, you're them. You're the neo Confederates. Congratulations. They revolted against the Constitution too. That's what you're doing. And quite frankly, um, I hate you for it. I mean, I do. Like, I mean, I hate you for it. I mean, everyone's redeemable, right? And I welcome people changing their minds on this, but I hate you for that. I hate that you've turned your cultural resentments into justification for you know like constitutional destruction, and that is what's happening. Our republic is very much burning right now. That's how I feel. Anyways, why don't I look at the chat and see if there's anything worth responding to here? Wow, there's people been chatting quite a bit here. Um, yeah, and so yeah, someone mentions Godwin's law, the National Security Desk. Hi, National Security Desk. Godwin has apologized for Godwin's law because it permits people to underestimate Trump, which he sees as on the same level as Hitler. I mean, Godwin didn't actually make the point that you automatically lose the argument if you bring up a comparison to Hitler. He only suggested that his law, right, states that, and he has argued that people abuse it, right, to shut down legitimate conversation. It just basically says that the longer an argument goes on, the likelihood that Hitler will be invoked approaches one. Which is, I mean, it's kind of a funny, it's a funny, thing that kind of came out of like early internet forum culture, like Usenet groups. Um, but sure, right? If a conversation goes on infinitely, probably everything will come up, right? So it's just a funny observation that's been um, bastardized by people who, particularly on the right, who want to shut down conversations. What else? Trump is hateful but impermanent. We need to begin exploring what will happen as he physically, mentally winds down and game out the internal power struggle that will ensue and how to position for that. That's from Daniel Broadkey. Um, I mean, he's in serious decline right now, right? I mean, his capacities are diminished. Like I would argue that he's kind of like decompensating in front of us right now. I don't know how much longer this can go on for. Like I count me as someone who doesn't think he's gonna make it. The next. Uh, um, he's not gonna make it the next 3 years. I don't think. I mean, there's this is like things are kind of going off the rails right now. Now, as it pertains to sort of like the post-Trump order, which is what you're asking to think about here. Yeah, I mean, I count me as somebody who's kind of pessimistic about things getting saner after Trump. I actually think the right is going to become a much, much more dangerous after Donald Trump. I think there's like a kind of a possibility that you kind of have like a kind of a J curve in terms of in terms of radicalization on the right, where when Trump kind of, leaves the scene one way or the other, whether he's impeached or whether, his health fails him, um, or ultimately there's the somehow a successful change of power through electoral processes, which I know everyone is afraid of, and we'll obviously be talking about that a lot in the coming year as we head towards the midterms. But I mean, the right today is very, very dangerous, and there's like several really worryingly uh, authoritarian factions that are well organized, have their ideological theories, their theories of power, their theories of change, and they're all aggressively positioning themselves now, right, for that post order. And these people are more dangerous than Trump in many ways. Um, and so I do I'm quite scared actually of what happens when he's gone. Because like, I mean, it's kind of weird to say that as like as bad as Trump is, right? He wants to be king, right? But he's kind of only out for himself, right? And he's very transactional, and there's something, and his transactionalism can kind of be managed at some level, as you're seeing, Europe and American allies kind of do, right? They just sort of, tell him he's great and stroke his ego, and and that often calms him down. But yeah, like the what comes next after him will be far more difficult to slow down. Um, and somebody like, you know, I don't. I mean, JD Vance is like obviously. I think he's more dangerous than Donald Trump, um, and has very openly said he wants to overthrow the Constitution. I mean, he said that right in his interview with James Pogue in Vanity Fair in 2022. Something that like I don't, the media doesn't ever point that out for reasons I don't understand. It's quite an alarming thing for anybody who um, you know, uh, you know, occupies the residence at the Naval Observatory to have said, especially, a short 3 years ago. That's not that long ago, um, and his statements and his actions since have not exactly caused me to update my Bayesian weights on the concern that JD Vance is in fact a seditious figure. If anything, I feel more strongly in that assessment than I did before. Yeah, Jennifer Anderson says that the Christian nationalists and tech bros have different ideas. I mean, that's right. Yeah, there is like a disjunction, right, of interests, right, within the Republican coalition. You have the sort of the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world, the sort of economic populists. They're sort of more aligned with sort of the Steve Bannon sort of thinking. And they've really kind of like tried to instrumentalize and control Trump to their ends successfully, I would say, and in many cases, but not as successfully now, which is why you're seeing someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene jump ship. And these people despise the Silicon Valley um, tech fascists. They don't, they don't like want anything to do with them. So that's like a major um, that's like a it's like this major sort of like right wing civil war in the making after Trump is gone. Um, but I mean, like, it does kind of need to be said that kind of part of the coalition, um, is sort of this tech right. They have sympathizers on the center left too, right? They kind of reach a little bit in that direction. There's certain members of Congress and the Senate that in the Democratic Party that I think seek accord with them a little bit too much, in my opinion. Maybe for noble reasons, maybe not. I don't know, but there is this other like troubling fashion. I mean, they represent, they're the They're the new robber barons, right, of the Gilded Age 2.0. And they're trying to game out um they're trying to game out like how to sort of achieve escape velocity, and have their own sort of internally managed private empires that aren't subject to um the legal, like the legal regime of a nation state like the United States. That's like what they ultimately want, right? They're trying to weaken that, and they've in many cases sort of convinced themselves that they're benevolent, that this will make the world a better place, that they can sort of be trusted to um they can be trusted to develop their technologies and create private communities and private cities, and everything's going to be like run like a squeaky clean and efficient with great customer service, and everyone's going to love it. And this is it's neo feudalism. They have different words for it. They'll say I'm an anarcho-capitalist, I'm this or I'm that. Have you read the sovereign individual, et cetera, et cetera. You have like someone like Balaji Srinivasan is like a thought leader for that kind of like thinking of the world. It's fucking insane. It's just neo feudalism is what it is. And someone like Balaji, right? He takes the point of view that technology leads and shapes culture, and so there's this sort of deterministic view that states simply can no longer exist. That technology has rendered states obsolete, and so these sorts of new political constructs, these network states, are the only thing. Like they're essentially inevitable. We have to embrace them because in their theory of the world, the rise of crypto and Bitcoin will render states unable to raise taxes because governments won't be able to force us to pay them because they won't have our private keys, and they won't be able to force, like, I mean, and this is like a really weird like theory of power, that the withholding of payment of taxes in the form of crypto is going to be the thing that disables the state. um I don't think that that's a coherent like theory of power. Personally, I think if you have all your money in a crypto wallet and you're living in a mansion in Beverly Hills, and driving a Bentley, and the government notices that you're not paying any taxes, and you show up and say, well, you can't get my private keys out of my head. I don't have my passphrase in my head. I mean, we throw you in fucking jail if you do that. Like, I mean, I don't like this whole theory that like the rich is gonna and people are going to uh uh drown the state as a result of unenforceable tax collection, because they don't there's no centralized banking system for them to seize the money. Well, I mean, like, we taxed people before we had digital payments. We did this, right? I mean, so I really don't understand like why they are so sure of this. It's kind of it's a fever dream. It's like this Rothbardian fever dream that these people have. And they'll get their comeuppance eventually. This will all come crashing down, all of it, because it's built on contradictions. It's built on uh, poorly thought out understanding of how political power works, a poor understanding of human nature, um, the nature of politics, and honestly, like a full just accounting of the world, right? Of the fact that we are physical beings, embodied beings living in physical space. Our food comes from food comes from physical space. Our housing exists in physical space. We operate in physical space. We are, in fact, not digital light beings traveling the fiber optic cables of the internet. That is not who we are. And to think that what's going to happen is digital space will be where everything happens, and we just have police in the real world to enforce the online rules, which I think is like how they kind of think this all goes, because like they're weird fucking autists that live through their screens and are antisocial narcissists. that have a very sort of cynical view of like humanity. I mean, their project isn't actually going to succeed. Like the worry, right, though, is that these are really powerful people with a lot of money and a lot of time on their hands, and they're trying to do everything they can to accelerate the demise um, of our system of government, because they think what I just described to you is what will emerge from the ashes. This is fucking insane. These people are fucking insane. Anyways, let's see if there's some other comment or question that can set me off on another rant. Um, Maribel says the plan is the shock doctrine. This is a reference to Naomi Klein's book, I think, right, from the late 90s, which was very critical of Milton Friedman. Naomi Klein, a Canadian author and intellectual. She's a I don't know if it's fair to call her a socialist or social democrat. Um, what I would say of Klein's theory. First of all, I don't think I think it's a very that the shock doctrine. People are going to get mad at me saying this, but I think was a very dishonest take on Milton Friedman. Um, uh, Klein's take on him was sort of like that he was just a sort of cartoon villain that was like engaged in like sort of a magical game of mirrors to trick everyone into handing democracy over to private interests. I don't I actually don't believe that about Milton Friedman. I think if he were alive today, I think he would be. My guess is he would be talking a lot more like Francis Fukuyama is now, than he would be than Peter Thiel. People forget, right, that Milton Friedman supported a universal basic income. He proposed it in his book Free to Choose that he wrote with his wife in the 1970s. As in the form of a negative income tax. And so Friedman agreed with the existence of a welfare state. I mean, he had a lot of, he had a really robust critique of government planning, of licensure, and in various incentives. I actually think that Milton Friedman was a liberal. He was sort of the kind of the grandfather of neoliberalism. That much is true, but I don't think he would have. I mean, Friedman, like he supported an inflationary monetary policy. To support government spending, right? 2% inflation rate targeting. That's like right out of like Friedman, like the monetarist school. I mean, that's still employed today by by the Fed, by the ECB, Bank of Canada, even the Swedish central bank. I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think I would be surprised if Friedman wasn't sounding a little bit more like me if he was still alive today, based on how everything is played out. I mean, I think he genuinely was like very kind of like liberal in his views, and he was very idealistic, and he existed in a moment where the counterexample was the Soviet Union and China and North Korea and Cuba, and the failure of economic central planning, and also just the overreach too of the New Deal, right? The New Deal was, I think, was good. I think it was good that Franklin Delano Roosevelt broke the back of oligarchic power and sort of restored, not didn't just restore, but a kind of established sort of democratic capitalism in the United States. But some of those programs went too far, right? Like the National Recovery Agency was a disaster. Price fixing was a disaster. The government basically setting a maximum price for haircuts, during the Great Depression, was a pretty bad strategy. Like that was like a mistake. Like not all of the arguments of neoliberals were wrong, right? But like the idea that laissez-faire, capitalism would bring about like liberalization and democracy. That was clear. That was something that Margaret Thatcher clearly believed in. Was there a great hope that after the handover of Hong Kong, back to mainland China, that those ideas would infect the mainland. And they, a lot of the neoliberals like just truly believed that, right? And they were wrong. They were wrong about that. And neoliberal thinkers like Fukuyama today admit that. They admit that they were wrong, right? Um, so yeah, neoliberalism failed. But I don't agree that like all of the neoliberal thinkers themselves were like literally these fucking villains that like wanted all this to happen. Um, I just want to be clear about that. Um, okay. Um, Nora Salo says, if something is not changed quickly, everyone with any expertise will be gone, and so many corrupted NAR people, Nazis, etc., will be in power, and the institutions will never recover. Yeah. So there is actually what people sometimes call a brain drain happening in the United States right now. It's very worrying, right? We're seeing academics decamp, American, scientific and research institutions, higher educational institutions for Canada, for Europe, for Australia. This is. Look. I don't think we're beyond. I actually think that's civil society is under assault. And the damage that's being done to uh to science and public health should not be minimized. But um I don't think we're beyond repair yet, right? We're damaged, but we're resisting, we're fighting. We're losing ground, but some institutions are fighting back and are pushing back. Some people are staying, some people are braver than others. All is not lost on this point. So, I mean, keep the faith, right? We're taking on water, but the ship is not yet sinking. We might be able to patch the hull and recover, but we're probably going to be, shoveling water out the side of the boat for a while, as we try to, you know, stay afloat in this storm. What else? Um, Arlene Mock says, "My father's entire family was murdered by Stalin, and my dad was in um, DP camp for years as a boy. What is happening now is the beginning of what happened in Russia between 1930 and 1944." Yeah, this archipelago of detention camps that are being constructed across the country with ICE, which is um, it's implicating legal immigrants and U.S. citizens on an almost daily basis is very scary. The fact that ICE is acting without regard to our constitutionally protected due process rights. Uh, we have due process rights in the Fourth and Fifth Amendment of the Bill of Rights. ICE is operating in a legal regime that, if you ask me, is a complete aberration of constitutional law. They're using what are called administrative warrants, engaging in administrative arrests, and putting people in administrative detention. This is uh, a legal construct that the courts have allowed, and they've allowed it on this like really interesting basis, right? That because immigration infractions are not criminal, they're not actually they're not felony infractions. They are civil infractions, like a parking ticket, right? Or a littering ticket, or something like that, right? And those kinds of infractions are don't require, typically, like, you don't have a right to a jury by trial. A trial by jury if you get a parking ticket, right? Because basically, what the constitutional jurisprudence says is that offenses that just have the consequence of like paying a fine, but like not necessarily going to prison, don't really rise to the level of invoking forth in like your due process protections under the Constitution. For good, there's like, that's kind of always been the case. Now, when it pertains to sort of immigration, one of the things that has happened, right, is we have this statute, right, the Immigration and Nationality Act, and it doesn't actually make immigration violations criminal for this reason, right? Because if like unlawful presence in the United States were a crime, then that would implicate your right to an actual trial before an Article 3 court. And so one of the things that Congress has done, right, to make the enforcement of immigration law expeditious, is they've limited it to civil offenses. So you can be fined and you can be removed from the country, right? Without and with minimal due process through administrative courts that are run by the Department of Justice. And that's kind of just always been the case. But what we're seeing with ICE is really an expansion of this concept, right, into this idea of like administrative arrests, right, where being detained because the thing that they're detaining you for isn't a felony. It's being treated as something that doesn't implicate these due process rights. But this is clearly like this is the legal rationale that that the administration has sort of like walked into, and I think that's unconstitutional. I think the Supreme Court needs to, although I don't think this court will, say that that you absolutely, like, if you're being detained, like you have like a right to like your habeas corpus right is intact, and also that if you're going to arrest somebody, that you have to have probable cause to do so, that and that walking down the street and is not sufficient. The color of your skin is not sufficient. I mean, they are still arresting and detaining people who present valid U.S. passports and claiming that they need to spend 3 or 4 hours verifying that it's a valid passport. That is like this idea that we can be required to check our papers while walking on the streets. This has been considered unconstitutional for a very, very long time. I can't remember the actual Supreme Court cases here, but there's several that establish this. But the administration is, and likely this conservative majority court is kind of going to play silly buggery with this here by saying that, like, these are administrative detentions, and so that those principles aren't implicated. This is very fucking dangerous. And it's a result of this conservative judicial revolution that's been built up, right, by the Federalist Society. I have friends that will defend the Federalist Society. Um, um, I think that the Federalist Society is just interpreting law in a way that serves oligarchic interests. I mean, I didn't used to think that. That's what I think now, right? Anyways, I just guys gave you guys a explainer there on some legal concepts. All right, we have time for some more questions. Let's take a browse through here. Anything else? Do we have, just checking over here? Do we have anyone? No? All right. All right. No, none in that chat channel. Maribel kind of responded to my shock doctrine statement. Shock doctrine, not in the economic sense, the broader sense of creating chaos in society and then stepping to solve the problem created. I mean, so yeah, I mean, it's true that sometimes people who talk about you know uh how authoritarianism works, certainly, like, looking at sort of the theories of Joseph Goebbels, um uh and also just sort of just analyzing sort of the way in which modern authoritarians like Vladimir Putin and post-truth authoritarians like Viktor Orban, Trump, the way they operate, yeah, is this sort of idea of sort of setting a lot of fires. Steve Bannon calls it flooding the zone with shit, where you create so many things to react to that the opposition can't make heads or tails of what's really going on. And this sort of like poisons the epistemic environment and removes the capacity for sustained attention on what power is actually doing. And that is certainly like part of the very deliberate strategy. And Steve Bannon is, interestingly, he's very open about the fact that they're using this strategy, and he's proud of it. He's proud. Um, um, Linda Aldrich asks, "What's up with Teal and the Antichrist tour?" Um, Look, I, I s- I spoke about this with Reed on his podcast earlier this week, and I've written about it. I've tried to, can't remember the name of the piece that I wrote, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know for sure what Teal truly believes in his heart, as it pertains to his metaphysical commitments, and his religious views. But but the argument that he's making, to your question, is that that what the Antichrist represents in Revelations in the New Testament, um, is a one world government, sort of like the sort of the one global world order, and that he's arguing that the prophecy is an analogy for that. That's what his sort of private seminars are arguing. Um, and it should be said what Teal is arguing for, which is the dissolution of nation states and the devolution of political power to private fiefdoms. That these things like network states to uh, you know uh, or to the kinds of covenant societies that Hans Hermann Hoppe talks about, Um, generally, there's sort of generally in political science like this. These ideas are referred to as sort of anarcho-capitalist views. And if you spend any time in like crypto Bitcoin circles, you'll hear these concepts from people like all the fucking time, right? And like the Ethereum community and the Bitcoin, less so in the Ethereum community and the Bitcoin community, but you will find them, some of them, in that world. So, like he's, I mean, he's arguing for a world that's run by pure capitalism, basically. So anyways, where are we here? Sassy Cuz. So Sassy Cuz says, my fear is even if we win the midterms, Donald Trump will not accept the result. I mean, that it's clear he's not going to accept the results. The question is like, will Democrats control Congress in spite of his refusal to accept it? That's the real question. I mean, I think there's a even more proximate concern. I think that Donald Trump is preparing to deny the results of these California and New Jersey elections that are coming up, in a few weeks. Right? We have the Proposition 50 election, which yours truly voted yes on, and I returned my ballot. I voted by mail. Take that, Donald Trump. I think he's uh preparing now he's sending these election monitors from the DOJ, and I think they're going to try and manufacture controversy and claim that they witnessed irregularities. And this is clearly where I think we're about to see a training run for 2026 in the next few weeks, actually. um Please, so Josie says, please acknowledge that Russia owns 47 and destroying your country is the end goal. MAGA won't have. I don't think that Putin owns Trump. Actually, if you want my, I actually don't think that Putin and Trump like each other anymore. But I think that they both see each other as like potentially useful. For Trump, it's like a little bit more pathetic. Like he kind of gets narcissistic supply from Putin. Uh, uh, Maybe talk a little bit about that at length. Putin sees Trump for what he is, like a narcissist who's only out for himself. Um, and I actually think that Putin's doing a pretty bad job at manipulating him. Uh, like right now, like if you should read my piece, what time is it, which is now available to all free subscribers, where I kind of talk about this. In fact, I building off of sort of the analysis of Vlad Vexler here. I don't think it's as simple as like that Trump's like working for Putin. That's actually like not the case. Anyways, um, so Tim, Timothy McCauley asks, Mike, have you considered running for any office? People are asking me this all the time. People in my life are encouraging me to do so. No, not right now. Not right now. I don't think that that's my charge right now. Um, I don't know that I would make a good politician, like honestly, but maybe one day. Never say never. Anyways, I think so. We're However long we've been going. We're going for just about an hour now, a few minutes short of an hour. Um, we have any other messages? Let me see here. Looking through the different chat rooms. Um, Look, I I don't like. I look. The thing is that I'm looking at a comment here. Someone sort of just suggesting that the 2026 election won't be, this assumption that it won't be free and fair, that it will be stolen. I'm not that cynical right now. There's a lot of good signs that, like, states, at least the important states, like officials in Georgia and stuff like that, and other states are like resisting Trump's attempts to push into their territory. And as Trump becomes like less and less popular, and you're going to have a lot of, like, even among like Republicans at the state level, who start to kind of worry about having their fate tied to Trump. Um, there's room for the opposition, to keep pressure on the states to not allow the federal government to completely fuck up our elections. They will try to do things, right. They're going to send like ICE to polling stations and deploy the National Guard. They're going to it's going to be wild. And it's going to be really important to remind people that they have to be brave and participate and vote like their life and their children's life depends on it, because it does. Anyways, that's about an hour. Pamela says that I'm wrong, that Putin owns Trump. Well, I'm happy to disagree with you on it. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about what my thoughts are on a future um channel. I mean, I'm not saying that Trump is on the side of democracy, Pamela. I'm just saying that, like, these dictators are out for themselves, right? They stab each other in the back. They're not like, this is like one of the advantages that we have on the pro democracy side, is that there's no honor among thieves. So that's one thing that we can always take to the bank and kind of keep hope alive. So anyways, thank you everybody for joining me on Sunday at the circus. I hope this was useful for you. I hope I enlightened you in some way, or didn't bore you, at least. Like, there's no greater crime in the world than being boring. So I hope I wasn't that. Anyways, thank you everybody, and I'll see you soon.